Join me for Talk It Over when my guest will be Carol Sasaki, founder of Home.
I want to say something. You are the most sincere, honest, best interviewer that I have ever had. I've had to do a lot of talk shows these last 2 years, and I've never experienced something like this. I want to thank you.
Enjoy this. Welcome to Talk It Over. My guest is Carol Sasaki. This is a show I've been wanting to do for a long time because she's a very, very inspirational woman. When you hear her story, there isn't anything that you won't feel like you can go out and tackle. She's founder of Home. Helping ourselves means education. Carol was physically and sexually abused as a child by a relative. And at the age of 13, she ran away to the Tenderloin district of San Francisco and lived on the streets. She found that by looking pretty, she could get by. Recently, she was honored by the President of the United States and was named Volunteer of the Year. You have quite a story. Would you share some of the details with our audience, please?
Well, I left home when I was 13 and lived in the Tenderloin district with Hell's Angels and a striptease dancer.
And the striptease dancer helped you out.
She did, very much, yeah. I went through life without skills, without an education, and felt, since I couldn't read, I couldn't do math for the life of me, that if I opened my mouth, they'd know how stupid I was, they being the normal people out there. And that obviously somehow I was crazy and nutty because I'd yell and scream and cry when I was upset because what had happened to me when I was a child, or it wouldn't have happened to me if I wasn't somehow weird. And I was obviously a failure because I was at the lowest realm of society, so I couldn't be smart enough to really do anything. And felt my main way out was to try to somehow please men. And that at least I'd have a roof over my head, at least someone wanted me for something.
And survival.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Then when I became pregnant, it was, I didn't want that for my son, and I didn't want my son to be the kind of man that I felt had used me.
And how old were you when you became pregnant?
I was quite a bit older. I was 25 when I gave birth to him, and had gone through a lot, had lived in a yoga community, had done seclusion for a year out in the country living in a teepee, had, done a lot, lived as a housekeeper and been in Malibu Colony. Basically what happened after Malibu Colony was I figured that I either could be the housekeeper, or if I could please the man and have a relationship, I could have the housekeeper. And men
so you weren't so stupid after all.
It became a symbol of, men became a symbol of power. And that because I felt so powerless myself, I felt desperate to please them. After I had David, I wanted to get out of the environment I was in. I hated it, and it was a horrible environment.
What about the father of your child?
He was a very, very wealthy man, extraordinarily wealthy, and I wanted a way. There was something about becoming pregnant that I wanted. That baby was mine, and he didn't want it, no one else wanted it, and they all felt I had become pregnant on purpose, and I wanted a way, and I wanted that baby to love and to love me. I needed that. I didn't have anyone that loved me. And I wanted that baby to know that I loved this child not because of the power games that my life was, but because I loved this child, so I just left. On welfare, they go after the father, and because he took the test in the privacy of his doctor's office.
The paternity test.
And it came out negative, and welfare said, therefore, I was lying and fraudulent, and I had no way of doing anything, so I ended up sleeping in a gas station and miserable, and had a...
And you had a baby when you were sleeping in the gas station.
Yeah, I wasn't actually living in a gas station. It was just a desperate night of, you know, not knowing where to go or what to do. And it got very bad, and I went job looking one day, and this was after being on welfare and the humiliation, and they're, you know, calling me a liar, and can't I remember who I've slept with and not slept with, and having to describe sexual acts, and just the humiliation that I just felt totally wiped out. I rocked like this at that point.
Like an autistic?
I didn't want anyone around me. I didn't want anyone else hurting me, and I wanted them away. And I had my baby. And I tried getting some jobs, and I didn't look the part. I had an anger at men, cut all my hair off, and couldn't get the job unless it was like washing dishes and all day long at minimum wage, and realized I was going to be leaving my child in this environment, and I didn't want my child growing up like these kids around me. And I was going to not...
Can we ask you to stop? I hate to break in.
No, do, please.
We need to take a commercial, and we'll be right back with Carol's fascinating story. Carol Sasaki is our guest. She is the founder of HOME. Helping ourselves means education. She's come from literally the streets to where she was named Volunteer of the Year by the President of the United States. Carol, I hated to interrupt you, but you were telling us how you had your baby. Welfare had put you practically in an autistic state where you were rocking back and forth, and you didn't want to leave your son in the environment while you went out and worked as a dishwasher. That you saw surrounding you.
Right, yeah, and welfare didn't put me in that state a whole lot. I had mental problems before I ever went on welfare. That whole cycle of once you feel bad about yourself. And the kinds of people we get involved with when we don't feel good about ourselves. Yes, and so basically I decided I needed skills to sell. So I had something besides myself. I needed skills. And one way or the other, I was going to learn them. I didn't care how stupid I was going to do it.
And do you think the impetus for doing that was because of your baby? What made you break from that mold?
For me, it was that somehow this cannot, as I looked around the surroundings, and this can't be happening. My son is not going to be raised in that environment. My son's going to have better. And it also became, I didn't want it to be, I wanted him to know a quality of life that didn't have just to do with power play. And so there was an element of that I did not want a relationship with a man because I needed him. I wanted him to see another kind of relationship between men and women. I wasn't sure if that was possible. But getting skills for me was the only way I was going to feel in a relationship with a man that I was there because I cared about the man, not because I needed to use him in some way.
So really you're saying that the power play was that you actually had the power over the men that you were sleeping with because you were using them as much as they were using you.
It's absolutely both ways. I think that women getting skills is to the advantage of men too. It's helpful for men because at least the man is going to know the woman that's with him is with him because she wants to be, not because
she has to be.
Right, right. So it gets used definitely both ways.
So what did you do? I mean, here you
are yes.
at the bottom.
I'll try to tell it real quick. It started with my taking recreation because I knew I could bounce a ball to kids.
Well, but you went to community college.
I went to a community college, was told by welfare, AFDC, that I could go for 1 year. And I fought that for 2 years. And during that time, met role models, which is basically what HOME is about. Met role models who inspired me to go on further and got information on how to. So I found out that then I was capable of going to a university. That took a lot of convincing.
Oh, I bet.
And yeah, and it was just a step-by-step thing. It was no simple magic answer.
Now, welfare financed your year at the community college?
But what I didn't know at the community college was that there was financial aid at a university, that I could make it to the university. And I didn't know the ins and outs and the rules. And the counselor before me was my whole life, my whole source of information. And in my home, I didn't know how to go out and meet people. I had fantasies of my carrying a picket saying, "Will you be my friend?" I didn't quite know how to do it. And that counselor, it wasn't really her fault, because here she is in a role in which she's burnt out. They've reduced staff, and they've needed to, and that makes sense in terms of the taxpayers. And she has to get out the rules and get that done and process me before the next comes in. So it was kind of a, you know, what could we do, trap. Got into college.
But now wait a minute, you had just said that you didn't really read very well, you didn't speak very well.
How did I do it?
Yes, how did you do it?
It was a matter of the rote learning, and so badly the anger in me that this isn't right and I've got to do something, pushing me on, so that when I'd sit in a classroom and I felt, you know, I had gained some weight and cut that hair off, and I felt yucky at first, and there came into the classroom little 18-year-olds who, you know, didn't even have to wear a bra, and they'd come plopping in and have their makeup all on and perfect and know all the answers, right? And all these bronzed young men and that were, you know, much younger than myself came in, and they knew all the answers, and I didn't even know what the teacher was talking about. So I thought, they're smart, I'm stupid. Then after a while, after picking up the language and realizing it was learned knowledge I was lacking, and just because I sat like this and couldn't look anyone in the face didn't mean I was stupid. Then I got into a seminar class. And in the seminar class, it was a psych class, and the professor asked, why do you think teenagers are committing suicide? Why is that growing at an epidemic rate? And this one gal that I just really admired raised her hand and said, I know. And she said, because we're all so depressed. And she had known all the answers in this math class I had taken, and I remember sitting there, and then one of the guys said, yeah, man, I mean, like, you know, like there's, you know, there could be wars and stuff. And they knew all the math answers, they knew all the grammar answers, and it hit me, they were stupid. And it was like, oh, it was just the answers I didn't have, but the inside intelligence, once I learned the vocabulary, the rote learning I could do. That's a process that each person has to go through. When they first start school, they're going to feel more depressed about themselves than ever, because we start behind. But once we learn the language called academies, then, and learn to play the game for our own benefit, then we have that intelligence from all the pain we had gone through, that I could write down this beautiful thing. I know what it feels like to want to commit suicide, because I tried when I was a teenager, and I've tried just recently. I know what it feels like. And I had my own special knowledge then.
We'll pause on that note, and we'll come back, and Carol will tell us how she farmed home to help other people in situations similar to her own. Stay with us. Carol Sasaki, who is the founder of Home, a group that helps women and men, but mostly women, who have found themselves undereducated and down and out, pick themselves up and get educated. You graduated the community college, and then what happened to you, Carol?
Went into the university. I want to just say something. We don't help them do it, they help each other, and we're just the channel to be used.
And your motto is?
Helping ourselves means education. Yeah, getting out there and getting information, just not institutional, but assertively getting out there. And if someone slams the door and says you don't qualify, you go, why not? Put that in writing. Ended up at the university. To make it real quick, it basically found that at a certain point I went to getting very good grades, again, once I learned the rote learning. And I knew positively that there are many, many women, men and women, that I met on welfare who are every bit as smart, if not much smarter than myself. And they're not in school simply because, one, they don't have the information on how to, and two, they don't believe they're capable of it, because of the same feeling I had, that if I wouldn't be on welfare unless I was stupid. Three, because the public believes the same thing, that they wouldn't be on welfare unless they were stupid, and that wasn't right, because how come when I was on welfare I couldn't figure out how not to be? I found myself going nutty. And once I was in school, once I learned the language, I could get straight A's. So that became my goal. I won an award. In a talk afterwards, I expressed those feelings, and there was much argument, and people felt very strongly that I was wrong, that if they wanted to be at the university, that they would be there, that the financial aid information, all that was everywhere. And I couldn't convince them. I decided the only way to convince them was to go out and bring some people.
And you yourself had trouble getting that financial aid information.
Oh, it was horrendous. I had a period when I was at the university where I had to borrow some money from some strangers, some people in some family housing, because I had not a penny and nowhere to go. And to call the welfare office was long distance. When I asked the crisis worker for help over the phone, when she found out I was an unwed mother, she said, "Honey, you lay in the bed, you make it," and hung up. I mean, it was like one, and then you get so that I was so kind of like this, you know, "You don't like me, I don't like anybody," blah, 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 that I turned everyone off, and they immediately said, "That person's nutty."
Crazy.
So it kind of cycled, and the more the emotions overwhelmed me and the anger overwhelmed me, the more it was kind of like, stay away from her. So it was a very cyclic thing. In fact, I went into the welfare office, and when they didn't have my check ready, Christy Leeton, I said, "You got to have my check ready!" And I started crying, and I just terrified her. She didn't know what was going on. And this is what I had done on welfare, and she took me back, and she calmly explained to me that that technique wouldn't work here. It would work against me. But she started crying for me. And there was something about the humanism that shocked me after how I was being treated, after how I had been treated previously. And Christy ended up being someone who's helped home a lot. So home, basically what home is a communication channel, and it's us. Those of us that feel trapped, whether we're on welfare, we're in the job of dishwashing, whatever, barely surviving, feel there's no way out of it, feel hopeless. I want a communication channel that shows people who have done it and how they've done it. Lots of different options, not answers. Not that there is one way and therefore you should do it that way, because I don't believe in that. Home's that communication channel. It doesn't help people, it just shares information.
And one way you do so is by?
Through a newsletter that goes out to every state in the country, and 8,000 people, and it's called The Home Door. You can call area code 509-332-6232 or write to P.O. Box 621, Pullman, Washington. And basically, if you write home Pullman, it usually gets there. Zip code's 99163. Yeah, they know that in Pullman, that's where home is.
And from that work, how many people, do you know how many people are now in universities and schools?
No, we're just getting back the surveys, and it's exciting because it's just been really a horror lately. It's funny, the more successful we've become, and with the national publicity, the more it has been difficult to keep it a channel of by for, and it has just been really
say that
awful.
again. You said that quickly.
Of by for low-income people and alumni. We have people who have never experienced it who volunteer because they understand what it's like to feel very humiliated. But to keep it that unbiased channel where we're not of any particular university or community college, many of our people choose the community college route, which is excellent, or the business route, but to simply share the information with each other so you can so you don't learn the hard way, so that you can learn from some other people's mistakes, not say those are answers, but say, that maybe I'll check it out for myself.
We'll be right back, and we'll give you the phone number and the address once again, and we'll talk about Carol becoming Volunteer of the Year and all sorts of wonderful things that have happened in her life that she caused to happen. Stay with us. Carol Sasaki, founder of Home, has been sharing her incredibly inspirational life story with us. Before we finish up your college years, Carol, what was your degree in, and then what did you do right after graduating?
I have a master's in adult and continuing education, and I'm now working on a doctorate in international studies.
Not too shabby.
It's fun.
In your spare time, you're working on this.
Well, actually, I have, I recently, with many tears, quit school in order to full-time work on Home. I've got to get the funding for additional staff, and then I'll go back and finish it.
And the headquarters of Home will be in Spokane?
Yeah, that's just getting set up now. Yeah.
You were named Volunteer of the Year, and you were honored by the President of the United States. Would you please share those stories with us?
Well, it was a wonderful honor because I was asked to sit next to him at lunch, so I was able to talk about Home.
In Washington, D.C.?
In Washington, D.C. at the White House, and to talk about Home.
At the White House?
Yes,
Okay.
And I told him that for myself, the biggest problem, he wanted to find out more about home and said he was really interested and intrigued by the concept.
And he asked you to sit beside him.
Mm-hmm. And the biggest problem for me with home, I explained, was that those of us that understood the problem are those of us that had been through it. But by the very fact we'd been through it, we also didn't know the world of finance to get the funding for it. And that my husband and I were, you know, $28,000 in debt and going more in debt each year as we're growing more and more national. And the more it works and is successful, the more of a financial burden on us. My husband's a postdoctoral student at the university. And he said, I hadn't thought of that. And we talked further and said, that's true, and I'll help you. I said, what?
Not too shabby an offer.
Yes, and took down my name and address and has helped. And we've had some beginning things take place, so that was very meaningful. In fact, afterwards I had to go up for the award, and I had tears coming down, and of course I was seeing all of the women who, you know, and men, I can't forget some of the men. We have 20% men, and they're wonderful. That we've worked in the middle of the night trying to get the newsletter out, and, you know, borrowing money, and people who have donated out of their welfare check. And they were all there with me as I walked up, and the tears started coming, and I went like this on national TV. That's what I saw. You know, crying. But it was overwhelming. It really was. It made me feel that, by golly, if you really believe something and you stick to it every time you're down, that maybe we can do it.
And you have proved that.
I don't know.
Movie of the week? Book? Been a guest on Phil Donahue? Sally Jesse Raphael? Tell us about the movie and the book.
Well, they've got me in this silly contract where I'm not supposed to talk until they have their promotional tour too much. It's basically, it's my life story, and what we're working on now is I very much want that it's not just a dramatization of my life, but a chronology that we use to highlight all the incredible life stories of women that I've met through home, and all the different options that are out there for us when we're feeling stuck.
And you're going to write your own book.
Yes, yeah, I didn't sell that. Yeah, they wanted that when they bought the movie, and I had some other offers outside of that, so I decided to hold off. And
we have 30 seconds. Would you like to leave our audience with a message?
I guess just I want to express that nobody outside of us, we think of ourselves so much in terms of what other people think of us, and they thought I was crazy, mentally crazy, and no one can decide what we're capable of but ourselves. And that once we decide what we're capable of, we can't let anyone take that from us. And we've got to just keep knocking no matter what. Just keep knocking.
Good evening.